I have offered the idea that, well, let's say in explication of the differential Mandela Effect perceptions. That is to say, and clearly I'm tired because I'm not making an effort to make it simple. Some people perceive Mandela effects. Australia used to be somewhere else. South America used to be somewhere else. Yes. Some people don't believe it. No, they don't perceive it. Or perhaps they perceive it and get so angry and scared they shut down the perception. Right? I offered the idea that of the perhaps a third of the population who walked in recently, they still have some awareness of the second and third mind. And these people, having access to the higher, are able to remember Mandela effect changes, just as they're more likely to remember dreams or remember other lifetimes, more so than the folks who think this world is real and perhaps the only real. And I don't know that I have said it explicitly, but it's likely to be understood from what I've said, that the Mandela effect people, those who perceive it, are somehow more evolved than others. And I want to specify, to be explicit, that this is clearly not true. These people looked at a world map and said South America moved 3,000 kilometers to the right. Right? This massive continent moved 3,000 kilometers to the east. And the people who've been drawing these lines about how sacred sites are connected are still drawing these lines, even though the continent has moved. This is either impossible or a change so massive that for most it's inconceivable. Anybody in the right mind would be saying, what the hell? Because that's the only intelligent question. When you see that a landmass this size, that's been part of the planet and where it is for tens or hundreds of millions of years, is suddenly moved by such a massive distance, what else can you say but what the hell? Right? And the Mandela people accept this. And yet, what they're saying is, oh my God, look, there's a little tail on this letter in this logo. Oh my God, there's a dash missing here. I'm so freaked out. Now, for the children who are just starting to perceive it, I understand that seeing 3PO's leg a different color can be disconcerting. But my experience has been that the more things change, Steve Jobs is dead, Deepak Chopra's a cunt. Well, to be more specific, he's a pedantic, aggressive, combative, savage little twat. He's just awful. That they're not saying these things. Yeah, Mandela's alive, but how many have died? Yeah, maybe this band has a new album and that's cool, or this one word in this one song has changed, but they've stopped there. They're like people at a sporting event with their head following the ball back and forth, or like a cat watching a ping pong match. And every so often they'll say, ooh, a change. But this does not make them more evolved. If they were, they'd be saying, what's going on? What's the pattern? And they'd be noticing the big changes and say, who the hell cares that Ford's got a loop-de-loop? Australia's an entirely different shape. Italy and Denmark are both twisted all out of shape. They'd be noticing the big change. These trends I've been talking about. The fading away of religions, the increasing awareness of individual, the increasing spirituality, the massive number of people who are talking about a great shift and the changes happening and the end of war, they'd be noticing some of these things and saying, this is a little more than a loop-de-loop on a logo. And yet they're not, day after day. I've watched these guys for 2 hours at a time, a group of them talking on a live chat. Let's go back and look up in a newspaper and see if we can find evidence to prove it was really this other thing. Who cares if it was really that other thing? The Ford logo or the dash on Kit Kat or the spelling of Winona Ryder's name. These things are what made you aware something's going on. But once you're aware something's going on, if you continue to sit in the stands with all the rest of the people who aren't aware, you're just another fat, lazy, stupid consumer eating your popcorn and going, ooh. Right? You're sitting next to the other guy in a 3D film and you've got 3D glasses and the other guy doesn't. But you're still just sitting back mindlessly watching the film. You're not saying, what's the message? What's it mean? Oh, I've seen some idiots who are fear-mongering, but they didn't say, what's the pattern? They said, I was already convinced the world was ending. I was already convinced the elite were controlling our mind. I was already convinced Satan's bringing about the end of the world so some mythical God can come back. They just use this as a new vector to express the ideas they already had. If these people were, in fact, more aware and more advanced, they would have moved past the logos and said, what's really going on? What's it mean? I've seen exactly one of the people that I've watched making these videos on Mandela changes, only one, saying, I've looked at what's going on and I've made these conclusions. I think there's something larger controlling it. But even this one isn't noticing the change in Deepak Chopra, or many of the others, the new agey types who've been pretending to be the spiritual gurus of your planet, who are suddenly, the whole lot of them seeming savage and ugly. And others, like this scientist who's just complaining about religion, suddenly showing this much greater depth and awareness. They're not noticing that there are new sites that have been there apparently forever, but before a week or two ago weren't there. They're not noticing the big and substantial things, and the further they go along, the more obsessed they get with little tiny unimportant details. These people are not grown-ups. They're not even more mature than the people who don't see the Mandela Effect. They, by some random fluke, have the ability to perceive some things have changed. But just as someone gave the example of, he asked his friend all the traditional Mandela Effect questions, and the friend gave all the right ideas, and he said, you're seeing the Mandela Effect. And this friend said, oh, I'm not one of those conspiracy nuts, and immediately went back and started to edit all his own answers. This person was building a wall of close-mindedness. The people doing the Mandela Effect are building a wall of close-mindedness by continuing to hunt for all these little trivial things and missing the massive changes. Their own logos are changing. Their own videos are changing, and they're failing to notice. There is this massive and important change going on, and it's affecting everything. And yet they're obsessing about jots and tittles. Tiny little bits so small that they had no purpose other than to wake you up in the first place. This world doesn't have people that it had yesterday. They're gone. They were never born. And it has others that were never there. And every single one of the ones who is here is changed. And maybe they notice a little change in themselves, but that's no more interesting than scratching your balls. That's just a little tiny bit of self-awareness. They should be noticing all of the people and all of the things that are changing. And they should let go of the triviality which keeps them as bound up as the people who are refusing the changes, and noticing these massive things that are going on. And if there are any of those, I haven't found them. This is the big disappointment for me. I had hoped that these people would mature and begin to look at the bigger pictures. And what I see is the same almost religious obsession. Maybe it's not fair to call it religious. It's more like a kitten with a ball of string. Once it's there, they can't help but focus on it. But with these tiny little things and missing all that matters. Is there no one in the world besides me and the people I'm teaching putting these things together and noticing these massive, astounding changes? And maybe being afraid and maybe being excited, but noticing. Where are those people? Because those changes are only going to get bigger. We're going to hit a world where World War I and World War II didn't happen. And these people will still be looking at logos saying, I think this logo has changed. Not really realizing that product didn't exist. Not realizing that this is a video recording of something from 1800, when video cameras weren't even invented. Yet, back then, but they will be. This is an indictment, I suppose, of everyone who claims to be a Mandela Effect person and thinks of themselves as more aware, and they complain. I try and tell the clueless people and they won't listen to me, because I'm right and they're wrong. But no, they're as clueless as the clueless people. They've taken this remarkable gift and fixated at a point, and they're staring at this little point while everything around them is a raging maelstrom of change. There need to be people out there right now noticing bigger and bigger changes, and not just noticing and complaining about it, but seeking the trends and seeking the wisdom in it and watching it happen. If this does not occur, then there's only going to be me and a tiny handful of you that I've taught, who are afterwards going to be able to say, guys, this was the history of your world. Look at all these things that happened. And that's a lot of responsibility to set on your shoulders, because I'm certainly not going to be teaching white belts at that point. These people need to wake up. Right? So this is an indictment of their behavior, the obsessive, kitten-like devotion, the religiosity. And more than a call, a requirement for them to wake up. And if not them, if they're stuck in their little ball of string, tied up, unable to get free, then others need to wake up and start noticing. We need thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands noticing these changes and remembering. So should we get to a place where the world is vastly improved, they can teach people what it was.